Can't sleep? Then here's a story to keep you company. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm always curious. Dinner with friends. Callie sat at a cozy corner table in a dimly lit restaurant, surrounded by the warm chatter of friends and the gentle clink of silverware on plates. The scent of garlic and roasted tomatoes wafted from the kitchen, mixing pleasantly with the laughter at their table. It was meant to be a relaxing night out, just a handful of friends sharing a meal and stories. Drew, her husband, was by her side, animatedly recounting a funny anecdote from work as Callie listened with a soft smile. She rested her hand on his arm, feeling content in that moment, proud of how far they had come since their teenage years. They were both only 25, but their journey together had started a decade ago, in the unsure world of high school halls and whispered promises. Now, here they were, married for a few years, parents to 3 beautiful children, and navigating the challenges of young adulthood hand in hand. This dinner was a rare occasion for them to unwind, with the kids at home under a babysitter's care. The friends around the table were relatively new in their lives, colleagues of Drew's and their partners, people who hadn't been around during the early chapter of Callie and Drew's story. At the head of the table, one of the friends, Marcus, raised a glass in a light-hearted toast to finally scheduling a double date night without any of the toddlers interrupting. Everyone chuckled knowingly. Callie felt a bashful pride well up. She and Drew often joked about how rare these nights out were. She clinked her glass of water gently against Drew's beer. His eyes met hers in a tender glance that said, "We deserve this." Drew had had a couple of beers by now, and a comfortable flush colored his cheeks. He was relaxed. More relaxed than Callie had seen him in a while. Between balancing work and their bustling household, it warmed her heart to watch him unwind and joke around. As the conversation flowed, the group swapped humorous stories about work mishaps, childhood memories, and half-baked holiday plans. Callie chimed in with her own bits here and there, all the while maintaining a gentle, content presence, enjoying the dynamic of the group. Halfway through the meal, the topic naturally drifted to family and future plans. One of the other women at the table, Lena, leaned forward with an earnest smile. "You two have known each other forever, right?" she asked. "It's so cool you have a family already. My partner and I can barely keep a houseplant alive, let alone think about kids." A couple of people laughed. Callie smiled politely, glancing at Drew. He grinned back. "Yeah, we started pretty young," he replied. "High school sweethearts." There was a note of pride in his voice when he said it. Marcus, swirling the wine in his glass, jumped in with a playful smirk. "Come on, Drew, what's your secret? How'd you convince a great girl like Callie to stick around since you were, 15? Drew snorted, looking at Marcus with mock offense. "What, you think I had to convince her?" he bantered. "Maybe I'm the catch here." Callie rolled her eyes in good fun. "Oh, absolutely," she retorted with a chuckle. "I had to beat off a dozen other girls with a stick just to have a chance with this one." The table laughed. Drew placed an arm around the back of Callie's chair and squeezed her shoulder gently, appreciating her humor. "In all seriousness," he said, looking around at their friends, "we kind of just grew up together. We've been through a lot. Not much of a secret, just love and a lot of patience. Plus a healthy dose of chaos," Callie added with a grin. "We kind of got thrown into the deep end of life together." Lena cocked her head curiously. "What do you mean?" Callie hesitated for a moment, wondering how much to share. The story of their first child wasn't something she usually blurted out to new acquaintances. It was personal and precious, equal parts terrifying and beautiful. She felt Drew's hand slide down from her shoulder to take her hand under the table, a subtle show of support. "Well," Callie began, choosing her words carefully. "We had a bit of a surprise early on. Our first daughter came along when we were 19. Totally unexpected." She gave a small, fond smile, though her heart fluttered with the recollection of that confusing, emotional time. "We were really young, and it wasn't planned at all. But we made it work." One of the men across the table let out a low whistle of astonishment. 19 and already parents? Wow, that must have been intense. "It was," Drew agreed, chuckling softly. "One minute you're worrying about college essays and part-time jobs. The next minute you're buying diapers and formula. It was a crazy time." His thumb unconsciously rubbed the back of Callie's hand as he spoke. "But you two are still together and thriving," Lena observed kindly. "That's seriously impressive. A lot of young relationships can't handle that kind of pressure." Callie felt warmth in her chest at Lena's genuine praise. "Thank you," she said softly. "It wasn't easy, but it helps that we really, truly loved each other." "Still do." She leaned her shoulder into Drew affectionately, and he responded with a gentle nod. Marcus, who had been listening with an inscrutable expression, chuckled and raised his glass again. "To Callie and Drew, then, the power couple among us." They all raised their glasses and took a drink, in Callie's case, a sip of water. She couldn't help but blush slightly at the attention, but she was used to that kind of reaction whenever people learned of their early start. To shift the focus off themselves, she turned the question back to the others and listened as each friend spoke about when or if they wanted kids. The atmosphere remained light-hearted, but now a thread of earnestness ran through the conversation. Talk of hopes for the future, fears about parenthood, and the unpredictability of life. Drew, still a bit flushed from the alcohol and laughter, was in storyteller mode. He recounted a recent weekend adventure with their 3 kids, a chaotic trip to the zoo that ended in ice cream stains and happy exhaustion. Everyone was thoroughly entertained by the tale of their toddler trying to hug a bemused peacock, and their 5-year-old's dramatic reaction to a melting ice cream cone. Callie chimed in occasionally to add details, while the others listened, enthralled by the window into their life. She noticed how animated Drew was, gesturing as he described the scene, clearly a doting father. It made her heart swell with affection. She loved seeing him like this, proud of their family, making others laugh. It reassured her that despite the challenges they'd faced, he was happy with the life they built. As the laughter from the zoo story faded, Marcus leaned in, an empty plate pushed aside. "Man, hearing you talk about all this makes me realize how different our 20s have been. I can't even imagine having 3 little ones already." Another friend, Eric, nodded. "Seriously, I was such a mess at 19, I can't picture juggling a baby at that age." Drew took a long sip from his beer and shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. "We didn't picture it either. It just happened." "Yeah, how did that happen?" Marcus teased lightly, wagging a finger. "You two seemed like the responsible type. High school sweethearts being careful and all." It was an innocent tease, but Callie felt a slight prickle of discomfort. She and Drew had indeed been responsible, exceedingly so. She remembered diligently renewing her birth control implant, and the shock that struck like lightning when she discovered, despite it all, she was pregnant. In her peripheral vision, she saw Drew set his beer down, the smile on his face stiffening just a touch. She answered Marcus carefully. We were careful. I was on a long-term birth control implant back then, but nothing is 100%, I guess. We ended up in that tiny percentage where you still get pregnant. She tried to keep her tone light. After all, the end result was their beloved daughter, who neither of them would trade for the world. Seriously? That can happen? Lena asked, wide-eyed. Callie nodded. It's rare, but yes. I didn't know I was pregnant for a while because I didn't think it was possible. Thought I was just late or stressed. By the time I took a test, well, surprise. She let out a gentle laugh, though the memory of fear and uncertainty from that time fluttered in her stomach. Wow. Eric shook his head in amazement. Life finds a way, huh? Sure does, Drew interjected, but there was an odd note in his voice. Callie turned to him, noticing the way he was staring down at the table, a slight crease between his brows. The table's attention shifted to Drew as well, sensing perhaps he had something to add. He had always been a private person about their early struggles, usually leaving it to Callie to explain. But, buoyed by drink and the camaraderie of the evening, maybe he felt comfortable enough to express some of his own feelings on the matter. He looked up, not quite meeting anyone's eyes, and gave a chuckle that sounded slightly forced. Yeah, life sure has a sense of humor. 4 years without a scare and then, bam, pregnant. Pretty wild timing, isn't it? His tone was a bit flippant, almost jokey, but there was an edge beneath it that made Callie feel uneasy. Marcus laughed, oblivious to the subtle tension. Wild timing indeed. You guys must have been like, what, finishing up high school then? Just started college, Callie supplied softly. Her mind flashed briefly to that autumn of freshman year. Juggling classes and morning sickness, the quiet wedding at the courthouse at 21 after their daughter's 2nd birthday. It had been a whirlwind, but one made navigable by their devotion to each other. Drew snorted suddenly. Yeah, finishing high school, starting college, and starting a family, apparently. I used to joke I didn't even know I had super sperm or something. Lena offered a light giggle, seemingly trying to match his joking tone. Well, sometimes those birth control methods fail. It's nobody's fault. Just odds, right? Right, just odds, Drew echoed. He leaned back in his chair, and in the low restaurant light, Callie caught the slight narrowing of his eyes, the way he set his jaw. Something was off. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Before she could fully process, Drew continued, voice casual but words startling. You know, sometimes I wonder. Maybe Callie here just couldn't resist trapping me. He laughed as he said it, nudging her with his elbow as if it was all in good fun. Baby trapped at 19, who would have thought? The words hit like a sudden drop in temperature. At first, a couple of their friends gave polite, unsure chuckles, as if waiting for the real punchline. Callie felt her stomach twist. She slowly turned her head to stare at Drew, thinking she must have misheard. Trapped him? She could see the moment Marcus and the others grasped what was said. Their smiles faltered, eyes darting between Callie and Drew to gauge if this was some kind of inside joke. A heavy awkwardness crept over the table like a fog. Drew, still chuckling in that stilted way, took another swig of his beer, seemingly unaware of the effect of his words, or perhaps trying to act like it was no big deal. He avoided looking directly at Callie. Callie's heart thudded in her chest. There was a roaring sound in her ears, as if the bustling restaurant around them had suddenly muted. Drew's words echoed. Baby trapped me. She felt a flush creeping up her neck, not of embarrassment, but of hurt and anger. Why would he say something so cruel and so publicly? She gently removed her hand from where it still rested against his. "Trapped you?" she asked in a quiet voice, striving to keep it even. Each word was measured, though her mind swam with confusion and a dawning sense of betrayal. Drew shrugged one shoulder, still not meeting her eyes. He was focused on peeling the label off his beer bottle now, an old nervous tic. "It's just a saying," he mumbled. "You know, because we ended up with a kid unexpectedly. It's a joke." "A joke?" Callie repeated, her voice still soft, dangerously soft. She felt a surge of emotion she struggled to contain, aware of their friends watching this exchange with wide eyes and uncomfortable expressions. Her cheeks burned, not with shame, but with the strain of holding back an outburst. Marcus cleared his throat, clearly sensing trouble. "Hey, maybe we should—" But Callie didn't let him finish. She released a short breath and gave a small, tight smile as she turned her gaze to the friends around the table. If Drew wanted to joke, fine. She would give him a joke right back, laid out in cold, hard facts. "Oh, you're right, Drew," she said, in a tone of feigned realization laced with cutting sarcasm. "It's all coming back to me now. I totally baby-trapped you." She placed her forearms on the table, leaning forward slightly as if about to divulge a secret. Her eyes never left her husband, though he finally glanced up at her, apprehension flickering across his face. Callie continued, her voice steady and pointed. "Remind me, did I trap you for your money?" She tilted her head in mock curiosity. Her words hung in the air. She could almost see the sting as they struck. Drew's family had struggled financially when they were teens, while Callie's parents had been well off enough to help them. Everyone at the table knew that now, as adults, the house she and Drew lived in was bought with a down payment from her savings, a fact that made her barb unmistakable. Drew opened his mouth as if to protest, but no sound came out. A strained silence fell. Callie did not relent. If he wanted to float a baby trap narrative, she would expose its absurdity for all to see. "Or wait," she continued coolly, tapping a finger to her chin in theatrical contemplation. "Maybe I trapped you for your house. But oh, silly me. We were living in one of my parents' properties at the time, weren't we?" She offered a tight, humorless chuckle. Across the table, Lena placed a hand over her mouth, eyes wide as saucers. Drew's face flushed a deep crimson. His jaw tensed. "Callie, come on," he muttered, barely audible. His eyes darted around, noting the shocked stares of their friends. But Callie was on, a role now, and years of love and trust feeling suddenly undermined spurred her on. "No, that's not it," she went on, raising her eyebrows as if struck by another idea. Her words dripped with a calm venom. "It must have been your car, then. I mean, you didn't even have a driver's license back then, let alone a car. But maybe I really wanted to ride shotgun in. Your imaginary ride." A couple of the friends exchanged glances. Marcus looked down at his hands. No one at the table dared to interject now. The tension was thick and stifling, the once jovial atmosphere utterly evaporated. Drew stared at Callie, eyes flashing with a mix of embarrassment and anger. His pride was clearly wounded by her remarks, but he seemed at a loss for how to respond. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if swallowing back whatever retort he had. In all their years together, Callie rarely spoke to him with such biting sarcasm, especially not in public. but he had never insinuated something so deeply hurtful before either. Callie felt her hands trembling slightly on the table. She realized how far she had taken this in front of everyone, and a part of her brain was screaming at her that this was enough, that they should stop here. But another part, the part that was reeling from the insinuation that she had deliberately derailed his life, couldn't let it go in that instant. She blinked away the slight wetness in her eyes, willing herself not to cry. This wasn't the place to break down. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction or the guilt of seeing her cry here. Lena finally spoke, her voice tentative and light, clearly an attempt to diffuse the situation. I think what Drew meant was just that you guys had a surprise baby, right? She looked at Drew hopefully, offering him an out, a chance to frame it as a misunderstanding and end this uncomfortable moment. Drew seized the lifeline. He cleared his throat, avoiding Callie's gaze. Yeah, of course that's what I meant. Just a poor choice of words, he muttered. He attempted a shaky laugh as if to shake off the incident. Bad joke. Sorry. Their friends slowly nodded, and a few murmured in agreement, eager to steer the night back on track if possible. Marcus picked up the menu, mumbling something about dessert options. The others engaged in sudden busy work, taking sips of their drinks, fiddling with napkins, giving off every signal of wanting to move past the awkwardness. Callie bit the inside of her cheek. She knew the sensible thing to do was to accept that weak apology for now and let the night proceed, at least until they were alone. So she mustered a curt nod. All right, she said softly. She reached for her water and took a slow sip, more to occupy herself than out of thirst. The cool liquid did nothing to ease the heat of emotion burning in her chest. The conversation around the table resumed in halting fits and starts. Eric mentioned something about a new movie he wanted to see, and Lena latched onto it, responding with enthusiasm that sounded slightly forced. Gradually, the group found a superficial normalcy again, talking about anything except what had just transpired. But nothing felt normal to Callie. She chimed in where she was expected to, nodding when Lena caught her eye, forcing a small smile at Marcus's next joke. But her mind was elsewhere. Under the table, Drew had withdrawn his hand from hers, and the distance between them felt like a chasm. The rest of the dinner was a blur. Callie pushed her pasta around on her plate without appetite, replaying Drew's words over and over. Beside her, Drew had gone nearly silent, contributing only a word or two when directly addressed. His earlier jovial mood had vanished. He kept his gaze down, the tips of his ears still red with either lingering embarrassment or anger, maybe both. Finally, mercifully, the check was paid and the evening drew to a close. As everyone exchanged awkward goodbyes outside the restaurant, the night air was cool on Callie's flushed skin. Marcus gave Callie a brief, sympathetic smile that said nothing and everything at once. Lena avoided eye contact, clearly unsure what to say after witnessing what she had. Drew managed a stiff hug with the guys and a quick, polite nod toward the women, but he didn't say much beyond a gruff good night. Callie offered quiet goodbyes, her voice polite but distant. Inside, her emotions churned. Hurt, confusion, anger, all coiling tight within her chest. She longed for the safe privacy of home, away from prying eyes. The silent drive home. On the drive back, the silence between Callie and Drew was as thick as the darkness outside. The only sounds in the car were the low hum of the engine and the dull whoosh of passing streetlights. Callie stared out the passenger window at the blur of lights and shadows, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. She caught the shape of her own eyes, glistening, and realized with a lump in her throat that she was on the verge of tears. She refused to let them fall. Not yet. Instead, she focused on the passing scenery. Quiet suburban houses with glowing porch lights, the empty streets that usually felt comforting at this late hour, but now only emphasized how alone she felt in the silence next to her husband. Drew's hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles pale with tension. He hadn't said a word since they left the restaurant. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We need to talk." Nothing. Callie could feel the anger rolling off him, but also something like shame. He kept his eyes straight ahead, jaw clenched tightly, as if the road required every ounce of his concentration. In truth, it wasn't a long drive, maybe 20 minutes, but time stretched sluggish and heavy between them. Each minute that ticked by without him speaking felt like another tiny cut. Callie's mind raced with 100, things she wanted to shout or sob or whisper, but she couldn't trust her voice not to crack under the weight of it all. And so she too remained silent. Her thoughts swirled chaotically. How had the night derailed so suddenly? One moment they were laughing, sharing memories and feeling closer than ever. And the next, it was like stepping on a landmine she never knew was there. Did he really think she had trapped him? The mere notion lanced through her with pain. After everything they had been through, years of building a life together, 3 children, vows exchanged, how could he reduce it all to a flippant remark like that? She stole a glance at him. In the intermittent glow of streetlights, his profile looked tense, drawn. This was the face of the man she'd loved since she was a girl. She knew every line and angle by heart. The scar on his chin from a skateboarding accident at 17, the way his dark hair curled slightly over his ears when it got too long, the gentle slope of his nose that their second son had inherited. She knew him, and yet tonight he felt like a stranger beside her, sealed off behind a wall she didn't know how to breach. As the car turned onto their street, a quiet, tree-lined lane they had moved to just a year ago, Callie's mind flashed back to a distant memory, one she hadn't revisited in a long time. She was 19 again, sitting on the cold bathroom floor of her dorm, staring in disbelief at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She could almost feel the chill of the tiles seeping through her jeans, the thunderous pounding of her heart as the reality set in. She remembered how her hands shook when she called Drew, barely able to get the words out. He had rushed over from his campus library, thinking something terrible had happened, and in a way, something life-altering had. She recalled how he found her there, back against the wall, tear tracks on her cheeks, the positive test clutched in her hand. For a moment, his face had gone pale with shock. He was just 18 then, practically a boy. They both were. And yet, after the initial wave of panic, Drew had knelt beside her, wrapped her in his arms, and whispered over and over, "We'll figure this out. I'm here, Cal. I'm not going anywhere." In that memory, she remembered how fiercely he promised to stand by her, how certain he was that they would be okay. He hadn't hesitated or accused or doubted her in that moment. He held her as she cried, and though she had been terrified of how their lives would change, a part of her had felt relief because she didn't have to face it alone. Now, 6 years and 3 children later, to hear him suggest even in jest that she had trapped him, it made that old memory feel tainted. Had he ever secretly blamed her? Was there a tiny voice in the back of his mind, wondering if she had somehow planned it? Every instance of him joking about his super sperm or marveling at the odds was there, bitterness hiding beneath. Callie bit her lip hard enough to hurt. She couldn't reconcile the Drew from her memory, the one who comforted her on that dorm floor and assured her they were in it together, with the Drew who sat stone-faced beside her now, stewing in his own anger after essentially calling her a manipulator in front of their friends. The car rolled to a stop in their driveway. The house was dark, save for the porch light left on. Normally, returning home brought a sense of relief, a return to their safe haven filled with the echoes of their children's laughter and the comfort of their shared life. Tonight, it felt cold. Drew killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved or spoke. In the stillness, Callie could hear her own heartbeat thudding in her ears and the metallic tick of the car as it settled. She waited, hoping he might say something, anything, to bridge the gap between them. An apology, an explanation, even just a sigh, and her name spoken in that regretful tone he used if he ever hurt her feelings accidentally. But Drew said nothing. He simply unbuckled his seatbelt and pushed open the driver's side door. The dome light came on, illuminating the car's interior and briefly catching his face in stark relief. She saw weariness there, and worry at the corners of his eyes, maybe even regret. But he didn't voice it. Swallowing back a surge of frustrated tears, Callie unbuckled her own seatbelt and stepped out into the cool night. The chirp of crickets and the distant rustle of leaves were the only greetings as they walked to the front door. Drew unlocked it and stepped aside slightly to let her in first, a small, habitual gesture of courtesy that felt oddly poignant amid their strife. Behind closed doors, the house was quiet. Inside, a lamp in the living room had been left on by the babysitter, casting a soft glow over the couch and the scattered kids' toys that had been tidied into a corner. A note on the coffee table in the babysitter's neat handwriting read, "Kids asleep by 8. Everything went well. Hope you had a great evening. Sarah." The normalcy of that note, of their domestic life, stood in stark contrast to the emotional storm brewing between the adults of the house. Callie felt a tightness in her throat as she gently lifted the note and read it. A great evening? She closed her eyes briefly, fighting a swell of bitter emotion. She set the note down. Behind her, Drew closed the front door with a soft click and locked it. The sound seemed to echo in the hush of their entryway. They were alone now. No curious or sympathetic onlookers, no one to perform normalcy for, just them and the tempest of unspoken words. Callie took a steadying breath and turned to face her husband. Drew stood by the door, keys still in hand, his posture rigid. Under the warm lamp light, he finally met her gaze, if only for a moment. His eyes were troubled, a shadow of guilt in them, but also a stubborn hardness. The silence stretched, taut and fragile. Callie realized she was still holding her clutch purse in a white-knuckled grip. She set it down on the side table to give her hands something to do. Neither had moved further inside, as if the threshold of their home was a line neither dared cross until this moment was addressed. She spoke first, voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk about what happened tonight." Drew inhaled, then let out a slow breath. "It's late, Callie," he said, tone flat. "The kids are asleep. Let's not do this now." A spark of frustration ignited in her chest. For the past week, ever since that dinner had been planned, she had looked forward to a night of feeling like a carefree couple again. Instead, it ended in disaster, and now he wanted to postpone dealing with it? She shook her head, keeping her voice level but unable to hide the hurt. I think we need to do this now. I've been sitting with your joke for the last half hour in silence. I don't want to go to bed like this." He rubbed a hand over his face, clearly exhausted. "I told you at the restaurant. It was just a joke, a stupid joke. Can we drop it? Please." Callie felt her jaw tighten. "Drop it?" she echoed incredulously. "Drew, you basically told our friends that I tricked you into having a baby. You implied I plotted to get pregnant to trap you. How can I just drop that?" He winced and turned away slightly, tossing his keys onto the entryway table with a clatter. "I said I was sorry, all right? It came out wrong. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking straight." His words came out defensively, each one striking her raw wound. Callie crossed her arms over her chest as if to hold herself together. Being drunk doesn't magically plant new ideas in your head. It just lets out what you've been holding back. Her voice softened at the edges, betraying a hint of the pain beneath her frustration. "So, I'm asking you plainly, do you really think that of me? That I baby-trapped you?" Drew finally turned fully toward her, his eyes widening in alarm. "No," he said quickly, "I don't think that." But he ran a hand through his hair, agitated, and added in a quieter voice, "It's just, what else am I supposed to think sometimes? We did everything right, Callie. You were on birth control. And then out of nowhere, you got pregnant. It's—" He trailed off, shoulders slumping a little. "It's hard not to wonder why. Or how." Callie felt as if he'd slapped her, the sting of those words as sharp as the initial accusation. "You think I know why or how?" She uncrossed her arms, letting them fall to her sides, feeling suddenly weary. "You think I wasn't just as shocked? My life got completely turned upside down too, Drew." "I know that," he said, a touch of irritation creeping into his voice. "I was there, remember? My life changed just as much." "Yes, and we got through it together," Callie replied, voice wavering slightly. "At least I thought we did. I thought we trusted each other, so it never crossed my mind that you secretly thought I had done it on purpose." Drew took a step forward, then hesitated. His face softened a fraction. "I don't, Cal. I don't think that." He sighed, frustration and remorse mingling. "It was a bad joke. I don't know why I said it. I guess, I don't know, maybe I felt—" She spoke gently this time, trying to reach past his defenses. "Maybe you felt what, Drew? Please, help me understand, because I'm standing here trying not to fall apart, thinking that all these years you've been resenting me or doubting me, and that thought is killing me." He looked down at the floor, the muscles in his jaw working. When he spoke, his voice was strained. "Look, I've never told you this because I was ashamed to even think it. And I know it's not true, okay? But sometimes, late at night or when I'm in a really low place, I wonder—" He swallowed hard. "I wonder if we missed something. If maybe you did something differently with your birth control that you didn't tell me about. Not maliciously. But maybe deep down you wanted a baby sooner than we planned, and I don't know." He broke off, shaking his head as if to rid himself of the very idea. "God, saying it out loud, it sounds horrible. And I know you. I know you wouldn't do that. But my mind still—" "I can't believe you," Callie whispered, voice trembling. "After all this time, you still had that doubt?" Drew moved to the armchair adjacent to the couch, sitting down heavily. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and buried his face in his hands. His muffled voice came out strained. I don't know what to say." Callie sank slowly onto the couch, her legs feeling weak. The living room around them was so familiar, yet in that moment she felt unmoored, adrift on a sea of uncertainty. A tear slipped down her cheek despite her efforts to blink it away. "All this time," she murmured. "Did you ever even trust me? Or have you been secretly blaming me?" Her questions hung in the air, raw and quiet. Drew lifted his head from his hands, eyes glistening with his own tears. "I do trust you," he said desperately. "I was stupid to ever let those thoughts in. They were never more than a passing insecurity, I swear. I never truly believed you'd betray me like that." He raked a hand through his hair. "But tonight I made it sound like I did, and that's on me. I messed up so bad, Cal." Callie pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, trying to steady herself. This was so much to take in. Her beloved husband, who had stood by her through thick and thin, had harbored even a flicker of suspicion, planted by cruel jokes and offhand comments. And it had festered, unspoken, until it burst out as a hurtful joke of his own. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, a thin wail cut through the tense silence. Both of them froze, recognizing the cry instantly. It was their youngest child, awakened from sleep. The toddler's quavering sobs echoed down the hallway. For a beat, neither of them moved. Then instinct kicked in. Callie stood. "I'll go," she said softly, already moving toward the sound. Drew rose as well, guilt and concern battling on his face. "Callie," he began, reaching out as if to touch her arm. She paused, turning back to him. In the dim light, they could see the reflection of shared pain in each other's eyes. "We'll finish this talk later, okay?" Callie whispered, her voice gentle but firm. She wasn't angry in that moment, just utterly drained. "I need to check on her." He nodded, his hand falling back to his side. "Okay," he replied quietly. I'll be here." Callie offered a faint, tired smile, an unspoken thank you for understanding, and slipped down the hallway. In the small nursery, the nightlight cast a soft, blue glow, illuminating the outline of a crib and a rocking chair. Their 1-year-old daughter was standing up in her crib, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit and crying in confusion. The poor thing likely sensed the tension even in her sleep, or perhaps it was simply a normal toddler nightmare. "Hey, sweetheart," Callie breathed, scooping the little girl up into her arms. She gently rocked her daughter, bouncing slightly on her heels. "Shh, it's okay. Mommy's here." The familiar task of comforting her child grounded Callie, her racing heart beginning to slow. The little girl's cries softened into whimpers as Callie paced the room, rubbing her back and humming a gentle lullaby. As the toddler settled, Callie glanced back toward the door. In the shadows, she saw Drew's silhouette. He had followed her partway, concerned, but he lingered just outside the nursery, not wanting to crowd them. He watched quietly, shoulders slumped. He looked lost, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome to join them in that moment. Their eyes met through the darkness. For a moment, neither spoke. In that silent exchange, Callie could see the remorse etched into the lines of Drew's face. He looked utterly forlorn, standing there in the half-light, as if he feared he'd shattered something unfixable. Wordlessly, Callie turned her focus back to their child, who was now sniffling sleepily against her shoulder. She sank down into the rocking chair, cradling the little one close. She began to rock gently, the old chair creaking softly with each motion. Within a couple of minutes, the toddler's breathing evened out. The crisis passed for now. Callie continued to rock even after her daughter had fallen back asleep, finding comfort in the simple rhythm. She heard Drew step away from the doorway, perhaps to give her space. A part of her ached to reach out to him, to not leave things as they were tonight, but she also knew neither of them had the energy left to sort through the rest of their emotions right now. Not thoroughly. As she gazed down at her daughter's peaceful, innocent face, Callie felt tears prickle again. Tonight had opened a crack in the foundation of her marriage that she never saw coming. It wasn't destroyed, far from it, but that crack was there now, visible and raw. They would have to mend it together, carefully. In the quiet hush of the nursery, Callie allowed herself a few silent tears. She cried for the young couple they once were, so scared and brave at 19. She cried for the trust she thought was unblemished, and she cried out of a strange mix of relief and sorrow. That at least now she knew the secret doubt that had haunted Drew, even as it hurt to hear. After a few minutes, she heard soft footsteps approach. Drew was back at the door. He spoke in a low whisper, thick with emotion. "Is she okay?" Callie nodded, not looking up. "Just a bad dream," she replied quietly. There was a pause. "And you?" Drew asked, his voice barely audible. She knew what he was really asking. "Are we okay? Are you okay?" Callie swallowed the lump in her throat. She hesitated, gently smoothing her sleeping daughter's hair. "I'm hurt, Drew. I'm really hurt." Her honesty hung in the air. She heard him exhale softly. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." The words were humble, a plea and an apology wrapped in one. "I know," she whispered back. The only sounds were the creak of the rocking chair and the soft breaths of the sleeping child against her chest. Finally, Callie stood up carefully, carrying her daughter to the crib. She laid the little girl down, tucking the blanket around her tiny form. The child stirred slightly, then settled, her thumb finding her mouth in a self-soothing gesture. Callie turned to find Drew still standing there in the doorway, hands at his sides, eyes on her uncertainly. The weight of the night lay heavy between them, but also a fragile understanding. They had begun to say the things that needed saying. There was more to unravel, but not now, not with emotions so high and exhaustion creeping in. "Let's go to bed," Callie whispered. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that despite the hurt, she wasn't giving up on him, on them. They needed rest, and tomorrow they would face the rest. Drew nodded, swiping a hand over his face. He looked relieved by her words, even though he still seemed unsure if he deserved them. He stepped aside to let her pass, and together, silently, they moved down the hallway. Outside their bedroom, they paused. Callie could see him waver, as if debating whether to sleep on the couch to give her space. She answered before he could ask. "Stay," she said softly, meeting his gaze. Her eyes were tired, brimming with unresolved heartache, but also with love. A faint sheen of tears returned to Drew's eyes as he whispered, "Okay." He reached for her hand tentatively, and she allowed it, their fingers intertwining with a gentle squeeze. Tonight, the conversation had started, painful and messy. Some of the truth was out, but healing would take more than a few hurried words in the dark. As they climbed into bed, Callie felt the distance that still lay between them on the mattress. A distance not of physical space, but of things left unspoken and wounds not yet healed. Yet there was also a bridge beginning to form. His foot brushed hers timidly under the covers, and she didn't pull away. In the darkness, Callie lay awake for a long while, listening to the slow, uneven breathing of the man beside her as he drifted into a troubled sleep. She knew neither of them would sleep soundly tonight. Too much had happened. She stared at the ceiling, her hand still in his. Her mind swirled with questions and worries. How would they move forward from this? What would they tell their friends, if anything? Would things truly go back to normal after apologies, or had something irrevocably shifted? Yet, amid the uncertainty, one thought anchored her. They loved each other. Deeply. That love had carried them through so many storms already. This was another storm, one that revealed hidden cracks, but she had faith they would patch them together. As the clock on their nightstand ticked past midnight, Callie finally felt the pull of sleep. She turned her head to look at Drew's silhouette. Even in slumber, his brow was furrowed, worry etched into his features. She squeezed his hand gently in hers, a promise to herself as much as to him, though he couldn't hear it. We'll fix this together. In the stillness of the night, with the house finally quiet and dark, the first part of their story ended not with a conclusion, but with a pause. There were wounds to mend and conversations to finish, but for now they had the fragile comfort of each other's presence in the darkness. They would face the rest, together when the sun came up.